Back in 2017, a very sincere and generous charitable donor offered me a lot of money to support my little ministry here, and also because he was a mainstream Christian and very sincere, and through my witnessing to him in the workplace, he had come to embrace the Torah, the written Torah, keeping the Sabbath, the feasts, and bringing unity between what is called the Old and the New Testament. And so out of appreciation, he gave a very generous donation, charitable donation, under the condition, he said, for this much, I want it to be legally tax deductible, a write-off, as we also say, for him. As a legal, he wanted my ministry to be a legal nonprofit charitable donation for him. And so I, based upon my research and my understanding at that time, I believe I already was, I began realizing how serious this was when a lot more money was involved. So I began investigating. I didn't want to be wrong. I sincerely began asking my tax accountant and others, and reading updated IRS laws and regulations for charitable donation tax exemption status, which is what I would need to be absolutely sure and safe within my decisions. And again, not just for myself, but for others out there. And my goal, of course, in this study and research was to avoid IRS, federal, and California state audits, penalties, and fines. Nobody likes that. It's very time consuming to go through audits and to be fined. Nobody wants to be fined, and especially not, like I said, not just for myself, but for donors, and especially my brother here, who is donating a very considerable amount of money to take seriously. That could get some attention. That could stimulate an audit. So as I researched and as I studied, I realized, wow, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, a lot of strong, scary accusations out there. And I've come, and some have come to me, actually personally, to say the least. So Isaiah chapter 8, verses 12 through 14. It says, do not say a conspiracy. And I like the New King James. I think the King James Version puts this word conspiracy in there, I think, more accurately than a lot of translations. It says, do not say a conspiracy concerning all that this people call a conspiracy, nor be afraid of their threats, nor be troubled. In verse 13, here's that holy name, I'll say Yah for short, of hosts, him you shall hallow. Let him be your fear, and let him be your dread. Verse 14, he will be as a sanctuary. Right? Like Psalms 91. For those of you out there familiar with Psalms 91. But a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. And ... To who? Of course, you can continue reading the context for yourself. Jerusalem was having government problems and divisions. Corruption in the government. Yes, absolutely. Even Jerusalem was at that time, believe it or not. Before their fall, was leading, anytime there's corruption in a government, it's going to lead to conspiracies and etc. And of course, and they're the ones who are going to be offended by Yah, our Creator, the Most High, and probably similar to human governments and conspiracies today. Don't be afraid of them or be troubled. I'm not saying to be totally ignorant of them, but there could be some truth to some of them, but not to get overly fearful or troubled. But, they will get offended by the truth, yes, and they may come after us, yes, and they can be watching me or watching this video, but I always say, hey, If somebody wants to watch me, they're going to get a lot of Torah. They're going to get a lot of gospel, a lot of truth. I don't have anything to hide, and I'm going to come out with my understanding, my research on this up to date on this topic too, not in any fearful way. So, but regardless of Isaiah chapter 8, verses 12 through 14, and how that applies to us today, some will say that religious 501c3s are slaves to the government. The strong word, slaves. Or that 501c3s are incapable of expressing or addressing worldviews. I saw that on the internet. And you know, some people just believe everything that's on the internet or on Facebook. And well, I don't want to believe everything. Let's put everything to the test, and I want to question these things. I'm going to address some of these issues. I've even seen out there, someone even made a comment to me on Facebook saying, oh, part of the beast system, you know, because I got a 501c3. It must be compromising with truth. Well, and then I've seen information about being a free church. What does that mean? I got to study that. Or a corporation soul. A corporation soul as independent ministries, 508, and so there's a lot to study and a lot of opposing views out there. And I'm going to tackle these accusations in this video presentation and recording and cover some federal IRS legal laws, facts regarding religious tax exemptions and charitable donor tax write-offs. So how do we be tax exempt legally and have tax write-offs without compromise regarding all this? And let me say right off the bat, I don't claim to know it all yet. Like I said, it's confusing, it's difficult, it's not easy. There's so many laws and there's so many sections and codes and this and that, and how do you interpret this? So I don't claim to know it all or be right about everything, but I'm still learning and I'm researching as I go. And so I'm getting counsel and information from others out there. And we've got our treasurer, Warren, who's done a lot of great research and help with this. And Brother Pat's brought information to me. And even Ryan a few months ago has brought some concerns to me. And so I want to make sure I'm correct with my conclusions. But I want to address what I've learned and what information I have and have concluded and the discernment that I have to date. And this might just be a part 1 and a springboard into a part 2 based upon any feedback any of you out there might have for me. That might be good feedback to address more issues more clearly or more accurately, in case I express anything inaccurately or not clearly enough. And so this is what I want to do up to my current understanding and research. So I'm going to switch to my presentation now. So I've titled it, Be 501c3 or Not? And you probably heard the old saying, to be or not to be? That is the question. Ha! Okay, well, hope you like my little humor there, but do we have to compromise? Or is it simply cooperating? Can we cooperate in a way as 501c3 nonprofit corporations, public charities? Can we cooperate with the government without compromise of truth, of teachings? Or do we have to compromise? This is the big question that brings up a lot of heated debate, a lot of disagreement on the internet and even Facebook, believe it or not. And we have enough fake news to deal with, and it's hard to even discern sometimes what is fake news and what is real news. There's a lot of counterfeit people that create these studios, and it seems like it's actually coming from a news station when it could be coming from somebody's modern technology that's not so expensive anymore and doing a good job with video presentation. Anyway, getting back to my topic here, my most important 501c3 question. Let me lay that out for you right off the bat. I began wondering, how does being a 501c3 cause me or my ministry or any others to compromise with our Creator's commandments? You know, for example, the written Torah, or the gospel, or anything that we can see in the Holy Bible. Another question, how does this give the U.S. government control, influence, and or power to change our teachings, doctrines, leadership, membership, worship, practices, anything we put into practice in relation to our understanding and our faithfulness to our Creator and to His holy inspired Word? Now, what is the worst that can happen to us? Or what could or would the government do to us as a result of not compromising with biblical truth while being a 501c3 or not being what is the worst they can do to us if we're not one? Is it the same? Is it different? What's the difference? Really? Could the worst happen to us whether we are a 501c3 or not? Such as any persecution or prosecution? I think these are very important questions to ask. Another one here, how does being a 501c3 make anything worse or better for us? To me, that is a big question there. How does it make anything worse? Where's the evidence? What's the proof? I began researching this back in 2017, and then 2018 is when we finally became approved as a 501c3 with the federal government, and after being a non-profit corporation with the state of California. Let me ask this question. 501c3s compromise with what? What do they have to compromise? This is the big accusation, very strong accusation that all of them must compromise, all of them are slaves to the government, part of the beast system, how they understand end-time prophecy of the beast. Well, financial support and lobbying for U.S. political parties and politicians. Well, yes, there has been a restriction. If you want to get involved with U.S. politics and support politicians and rallies and financially support somebody like Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or anybody, and if you want to support them, yes, the 501c3s have been forbidden to do that. I've been hearing some rumors that Trump is trying to change that so that there won't be a discrimination against religious people and corporations from supporting politicians. Anyway, I'm not going to address that issue today. But what about the U.S. anti-discrimination laws, like discrimination against religion or sex, genders, or marriage, or age, etc.? As this nation becomes more liberal and the laws of this nation becomes more liberal in that regard and against what the scriptures say, does this mean that we need to compromise and adapt to everything in that regard? That's another important issue to address, versus, is there still a separation of church and state? Our U.S. Constitution. As long as religions and leaders are not harming anyone in any obvious, tangible, physical ways, the government cannot regulate. They cannot penalize. They cannot persecute or prosecute religious beliefs or practices. As long as, as long as they're not hurting anybody. I put an example, like, these satanic cults, anyone who wants to do sacrifices, especially human sacrifices. We don't have the freedom of religion to do whatever we want that's harming people. So there has to be a decision, and the government needs to regulate what kind of laws we can't allow religions to break. And of course, ones that are causing physical harm, I think all of us can agree on if we're not doing physical harm to anyone. And people say, well, there's emotional harm and there's other issues of harm, but well, that's where it starts getting kind of sticky and difficult, and where do we draw the lines? But when it comes to human or animal rights, activists may file complaints. Oh yeah, he's not being right to animals or good to other human beings, and that may cause the federal government to revoke 501c3 status. And this is what I've come to conclusion is if someone loses, that's the worst thing that can really happen. Nothing really worse is, okay, if you're a 501c3 and you lose your status because there's been complaints and you don't change those ways that cause the complaints, well then the government might say, okay, we're going to revoke your 501c3 status. But I've even had a federal agent tell me over the phone, I called in to the federal government and talked to someone who specializes in 501c3s, and he says that they can't fine or penalize us. There's a separation of church and state, as long as there's no felonies, of course. Federal and state laws do apply to everyone, not just 501c3s. That's the point and the conclusion I found out. It doesn't give us the right to have felonies, misdemeanors, hate crimes, and so discrimination, and so forth. So it starts going to be, there's obvious issues we shouldn't tolerate and the government shouldn't allow. If you're going to get thrown in jail for something, well, you shouldn't be doing it whether you're a 501c3 or not. Misdemeanors and stealing and other things there should be freedom of everything. So we realize that there needs to be a lines drawn somewhere. So how do we draw these lines and how do we understand? I'll kind of mention to you right now, moving on to the next slide here, is that TTS, that's Torah Truth Seekers Incorporated. That's the corporation, the nonprofit that I'm currently president of and founder. Our 501c3, we got our application accepted. Now, this is important information to realize because right in the mission statement, I'm not trying to compromise, and I'm laying the truth right on the line, trying to be careful with wording things so that there's not misunderstandings. So I'm sharing this with you. This is what got approved by the federal government. We said our mission statement is to continually grow in restoring more accurately the first century CE Judeo-Christian faith, love of everyone, right? Agape, his love, not the way humans define love, but there's some room for interpretation in our mission statement here. But there's Torah instructions. That's how we define love. And all doctrines based upon perfect unity and harmony with what is commonly known as the Old and New Testaments, aka the Holy Bible. I'll reword this now, of course, going back, if I could go back, but this is word for word, letter for letter, what I submitted with my application for a 501c3. And the government gave us the thumbs up. So continuing here, this also defines the original gospel, good news, more accurately as what is needed to prepare the way for the return of the biblical Messiah, the Word, and establishment of the kingdom of God and his righteousness to the complete prophesied fullness, right? Fullness of Torah, fullness of all the commandments in the Bible. Furthermore, if that's not clear enough, this also includes training volunteer converts and disciples for relative leadership, anything that's relative to the Scriptures. We're not going to go outside the Scriptures to define leadership and to make leadership, but according to personal gifts and talents, to build and grow new fellowships and families wherever possible that can bless all the outreached communities and nations involved and or influenced positively. Okay? Well, if we only affect one person, hey, at least we're planting and watering. We'll let our Creator give the increase in how much we fulfill this. But this is kind of the mission statement that I put in the application. Now, not only does our nonprofit corporation name, Torah, we got that word Torah that's so offensive to a lot of people, especially Christians or people who are atheists, and all those, that mean God of the Old Testament is, as you may have heard, claiming that he's so mean and there's no grace and love and just all these do's and don'ts. Well, we don't look at it that way, of course, but the name itself got approved, which is to say enough for potential rejection. As a 501c3. If there's going to be, okay, well, what are you going to do? Discriminate against this or discriminate against that? We never got any correspondence or rejection about it so far to date, but also our whole application process, there's more to it than just this mission statement. It was not rejected, but it was accepted, and I did not have to compromise. There was no questions, oh, well, are you going to agree with this, or are you going to agree with that, and are you not going to show discrimination with this or that? No questions, no compromise so far to date, as I'm going to point out in this next slide. So far, our 501c3 has not had to compromise any religious convictions. We have also not had to make any agreements or sign any contracts or covenants which go against any commandments or doctrines in the written Torah, the Tanakh, also known as the Old Testament, or the New Testament. Now, considering righteous Joseph here, we got to consider his example, and Daniel and Mordecai. All these three righteous men, Torah-observant men, were second in command and heavily involved with much more polytheistic and abusive, if I may say, beastly governments in their day. Egyptian, Babylonian, and Persian empires. And what I propose were worse than the United States of America in terms of government corruption and conspiracies and Caesar's getting assassinated and all these attempts to overthrow governments. And whew, I think we got it better than they did back then. That's my humble opinion anyway. But not saying it's perfect and that it cannot be better. It should be better than it is today. But nevertheless, in perspective, let me add that. But without any major compromises, there's no bad laws that can be made where they had to draw the line. And well, Daniel did draw the line, right? And his three friends did. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. His three friends were thrown into this fire. So even though we're involved with these governments, and if laws come against us, what do we do about it? Do we compromise? Well, I say no. But there are areas that we can be involved with where we don't compromise. And how do we do that? How do we apply that same righteousness that Joseph, Daniel, and Mordecai, and perhaps they had to compromise more than we did today in some little area. I'm not going to go there or go off on a tangent, but yes, the 501c3s are involved and must cooperate with the U.S. government legally. As anyone paying taxes must cooperate with the government legally to avoid audits and penalties from the IRS as best possible and to live and lead a freedom ministry. As all ministry citizens of this country, including myself as the president of a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, without compromise. And this is where we need to say, well, where are we compromising if we're compromising? Where do we draw the lines? Ultimately, our citizenship, we have to remember, as believers, should be in the heavenly New Jerusalem. We're confirmed that in Philippians chapter 3, Galatians chapter 4, Hebrews chapter 12, and I highlighted that in yellow, in two places in Revelation. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Interesting number. Where our main loyalty, this is where our main patriotism goes. So that we should not support any corruption in politics and or politicians of this land in the corrupt ways. I'm not saying that I'm not trying to say that you can't support or participate. What I'm saying is we shouldn't be involved with any corruption. And I do pray for the government leaders and the laws, etc. But loyalty to the Word is our greater calling here in the United States and out in cyberspace with whatever we're teaching and expressing. Within Torah Truth Seekers Incorporated, we've added this to our bylaws to avoid any accusations of discrimination. We're not going to discriminate. So with that, in our Article 6.3, we have without discrimination. None of the directors, officers, shareholders, we don't have any shareholders. It's a nonprofit, but just kind of put that there in case. Agents and members of this corporation are, none of us are to outwardly speak or practice anything obviously in violation of any commandments found in the written Torah, the Pentateuch, or also known as the 5 books of Moses, in which the same applies to the New Testament Messiah and canonized apostolic writings of the New Testament. We worded it this way because we're not going to accept the Apocrypha books as being as holy and inspired as what we call the Holy Bible, what has been canonized. And I'm not saying those who canonized it are perfect, but just to kind of be explicit on what we're accepting as Holy Scripture. And none of us are going to be perfect. We're not expecting perfection. But we don't want to have obvious violations that's out in the open. Someone say, hey, I've got this lifestyle, or I'm going to go rob a bank next week, and I still want to be in your group here. Well, we got to draw the line somewhere, and this is where we're not going to say this sin is worse than the other. If you outwardly speak against it or go against it, that's not part of what this organization, this corporation supports and allows to remain within. We want to put out all the leaven, the spiritual leaven, as we do on the 7 days of unleavened bread. And we're still going to have some here and there, but we're going to do our best to get it out. And when it's obvious and visible, that's when we deal with it, not going around spying on people, trying to pick on people and be too picky and just have a heavy hand, as a lot of churches do, in excommunicating and disfellowshipments and so forth. There's got to be some freedom of interpretation. As I continue here, it says, although there are sincere, diverse interpretations, we got among the 613 Torah commandments, and we see that within Judaism and even within Messianic Judaism. But within the 5 books of Moses, as counted by most sects of Orthodox Judaism, such sincere, limited liberty and freedom of interpretation is expected. Right? We don't want to get too picky and nitty-gritty, but just obvious ways. And the New Testament offers, we have to include that as explicit prohibition for human ministries to not enforce any curses or penalties found in the Torah. So a lot of times people say, oh, you believe in the Torah? Well, then that means you're going to do the death penalty on people? Or you're going to penalize people this way? Well, the New Testament does make it clear that the penalties are not to be administered by human ministries, that there has been some changes in the priesthood, as we can read about in Hebrews 7, not in the actual commandments. Of course, the death penalty has not been abolished, but it's just been administered to our Creator. There's still going to be a lake of fire someday. Ooh, I was going to put Colossians chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. I'll insert that with this video before uploading it onto YouTube, and you can go and read that for yourself. And also in Galatians chapter 3, verses 10 through 14, you can see in Galatians that he's talking about the curses or penalties of the law. We don't want all of the 613, because some of those 613 are penalties. They're penalties for breaking the law, and so rather than having a human ministry administer judgments and condemning people, this has been transferred back to Melchizedek and our Creator, our Father, also as the ultimate on the throne and judge of the whole universe, and with His Son and Messiah as our high priest at His right hand. So without getting into too much description here, I'm just trying to make it clear that we're not going to be penalizing people or putting punishment. We're going to let the governments of this land administer that as well, because we're in the laws of this land. They're not going to allow people to murder and steal and do all these things. We don't have to administer these things today, and the New Testament makes that clear. Continuing here in the bylaws here on Article 6.3 here, where each of the 10 commandments are to remain in agreement within the entire corporate membership, as listed in Exodus chapter 20, and that's just the verses for all 10 commandments, 10 words, and also repeated in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 7 through 21. And as expounded upon within the remaining Holy Bible. Any leaders and members who outwardly speak and or act against any of this may be voted out of all leadership roles, benefits, and services offered by and within this nonprofit corporation without discrimination. Right? What I mean by that, that's why I bolded that, is that we're not going to just say, okay, well, this commandment is worse than the other, and you're out because of, and then this person can stay in because, well, they've got this one and that's not as bad as that one. And so we're not going to have discrimination. We're going to exercise freedom of religion, of course, but not freedom to break any of these 10 commandments and any obvious violation or out speaking against them in any obvious, physical, tangible, noticeable ways regarding such actual biblical sins. And I put 1 John 3:4 there because that says sin is the transgression of the Torah. If you want to define sin, 1 John 3:4 is the biblical definition of transgressing, missing the mark of what the written Torah says, or types of strong disagreements regarding the entire Holy Bible as well. And so some of this, of course, can be left up for interpretation, and that's simply because I don't want to be too nitty-gritty and picky and heavy-handed, but also just to avoid the anti-discrimination laws that our country has, and may progress to become even worse as time goes on. So with wisdom and agape, that's the Greek word for love, but I like the Greek there because in English and even in Hebrew there's this one word for love, and it's very broad, right? In Greek there's agape, there's philia, which is brotherly love, and then there's this eros, which is like romantic love. Agape is this love of the Creator and humanity, and it transcends into humans' love for one another that goes deeper and beyond just brotherly love. It's more than just blood is thicker than water. Actually, water becomes thicker than blood when you have water of the Spirit, speaking metaphorically. This agape love is even deeper and greater love than even brotherly love. But with wisdom, we also want to have wisdom. And I'll quote here Matthew chapter 10, verse 16. It says, "Behold, I send you out." This is our Messiah, Yeshua, a.k.a. Jesus, saying, "Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves." You know, we can apply this to today as well, trying to avoid persecution or excommunications and so forth. "Therefore, be wise as serpents." Okay, not all serpents are bad. Serpents have some wisdom there. We can learn some things from serpents, he says. "And harmless as doves." Doves are not very harmful to anybody, really. If you get offended by a dove, well, I think you probably have some issues. Maybe go to a therapist about that. But anyway, moving on. James chapter 1, verse 5. "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask Yah, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him." Right? There's another scripture says, if you ask for bread, is he going to give you a stone? Okay. As long as we're asking according to his will, he loves to give us liberally if we have the right heart and the right motives and want to do it for the right reasons. So let's pursue wisdom, even on this topic of nonprofit 501c3 status, corporations. "Where there is no counsel," and you'll see other scriptures in Proverbs. This is Proverbs 11:14. "Where there is no counsel, the people fall. But in a multitude of counselors, there is safety." And this is where even this video teaching can be a springboard as it reaches other people out there to bring more multitude of counselors to me. And hopefully I'm bringing some wise counsel to others out there who are misinformed or uninformed with anything that I'm about to present or presented so far. Such is why, again, I'm putting this out into cyberspace, if I may use that term. So let's get to the legal facts. Okay, Russ, finally, yes, let's get to the legal facts. Well, I just want to play by the rules. I just want to do what's right. I don't want to believe rumors or hearsay or rumors of wars or conspiracies or anything like that. I just want to know what the facts are, especially legally in this regard. Okay, there's one article, a blog, I can share the link with you. If you want me to paste it onto the comments section, or you can send me an email. We're going to go to it right now, but it's titled, you can Google search it for yourself. It's titled, Debunking the Top 5 Myths About Churches' 501c3 Status. Okay, so here's the link, the URL to this article. And I'll just go to it real quickly, the 5 top myths about churches, 501c3s. And again, don't believe everything you see on the internet, but check up on things, and this is what I've been doing, and this seems to be what's compliant with what I've studied and researched so far, which led me to develop our 501c3. And there's not only from that link, there's some facts, but there's more facts to know. There's another informative online article I'd like to share with you. It's called Religious Nonprofit Organizations and Churches. You can Google search that. I can send you the link. And here's the link itself. I can copy and paste that to an email to you if you can't find it online. But as you study this, and from those articles and others that are similar, what I found out that there's some benefits to any true religious tax exemption status, not just 501c3. There's others out there that I'll get into in a little bit. And tax exemption simply means that the organization doesn't have to pay taxes, and their donors can have tax write-offs on their personal income taxes. So here's some benefits. Is the big charitable donors, they have tax write-offs, like I said. Now, it's not applicable to small donors. Small donors, as I define as being under a total of, I don't really know what the number is. I need a little more research to get updated on that. You know, somewhere around $4,000 to $5,000, maybe a little more or less. There's a long form and short form that people file for their personal income tax, and that's where you'd have to talk to a good tax accountant to get the updates on that. I haven't done my taxes for this year yet as I'm speaking now, so I don't know exactly what that is. But if you're not giving enough, then it doesn't affect you. You don't need to claim anything, whether you're a 501c3 or not. And so a lot of people who don't give much to charitable nonprofit organizations, if they're given less than that, they don't need to claim it. Just keep it simple. And you've probably heard that song, It's All Right to Be Little Bitty. I don't know if that's a title out there, or that song, and Alan Jackson, he goes, it's all right to be little bitty, a little hometown or a big old city. Might as well share, might as well smile. Life goes on for a little bitty while. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, was that Elvis that just left the building, or Alan Jackson? Anyway, you get my point. If you want to be little bitty, that's okay. Hey, I'm not trying to put that down. And Alan Jackson made a great point in that song. It's okay to be little bitty. However, I'd like to encourage us believers to also remember Daniel chapter 12 and verse 3 here. It says, those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Yes, eternal life was promised in the Old Testament. Not just there either, but here you see those who turn many to righteousness. But others, remember this scripture from Our Messiah in Matthew chapter 13, and 2 times in Matthew chapter 13, verses 8 and 13, says, and just quoting verse 8 here, "But others fell on good ground and yield a crop, and some 100-fold, some 60-fold, some 30-fold." So we don't need to compare ourselves among ourselves, and some people are going to bear more fruit. The most important thing is, of course, is to have eternal life, to live forever, and to shine like the stars. But if you have a passion to help turn many to righteousness, and you want to be part of a group that is, well, you're going to want to do things without compromising to grow, to help, educate, and outreach. And bring more people to conversion, to righteousness, not to join a social club or be a part of just an organization. It's more about righteousness and living the right way of life and repenting of sins. Other benefits for religious tax exemption status. It ensures automatic tax exemption. No taxes, that is, for churches and or non-church religious organizations. Such organizations do not need to prove their eligibility. If you already have the status and you're accepted by the IRS, whether it be a 501c3, there's a 508 I'll talk about as well. But there's a comfort in ensuring that for taxes, no questions, no doubts for anyone, including from the IRS. That's one nice benefit, to have absolute assurance to donors. For example, my brother who donated a lot of money, I wanted to have absolute assurance for him. I wanted him to have absolute assurance that claiming charitable tax write-offs for his write-offs. They don't want audits. He doesn't want audits or any heavy burden of proof placed upon him or them, anyone out there, regarding their donations, which went to legitimate religious organizations that claim to be official tax-exempt status laws. And we'll talk about the free church idea that claims that you don't need to have any status. You can be a free church and have that. You don't have to be a 501c3. We'll address that a little bit later for those of you who have patience to continue with me here. But in other words, we can legally pay less taxes to the IRS if we have a tax-exempt status. We're playing by the rules. The rules. Now, do those rules make us compromise? That's the big question of debate. So far, like I said, we have not had to compromise in any way. And we're respectful and loving of everybody, regardless. You've heard the old saying, love the sinners. We love the sinners, but we don't love the sins. It's okay to despise sin, anything that's against the Torah. And now we can have more money. If you're tax exempt and you're paying less taxes to the IRS legally and playing by the rules, there's more money to support legitimate legal ministries. Yah's money, that holy money. Whether you consider it a tithe or a free will offering. I'm not going to get into debating about that with this topic here. I don't want to go off any tangents, but money that could be his, or if you just want to pocket that money in your pocket rather than give it to the government, what's wrong with that? As long as you don't have to compromise. So look at some more benefits for all corporations. This is whether you're a nonprofit or not. Legal financial security against losing any potential lawsuits. Say you lose a lawsuit, someone wants to sue you, you offended them, or even if anyone, the government or anyone wants to take away your personal possessions. Well, any corporation, for all personal assets, for corporation directors, officers, and members, personal homes, that's talking about personal homes, cars, bank accounts, savings that are your personal stuff. If you're part of a corporation or a company that has tax exemption or any corporation, like I said, it doesn't have to be tax exempt or nonprofit, you have your personal assets protected against even lawsuits. Real estate seminars. Have you ever been to a real estate seminar on getting rich or making money off of buying and selling real estate? They'll tell you the same thing. Before investing into multiple real estate properties for profitable gains, get a corporation. They'll say, get it in Delaware, or get it here. get it as cheap. If you're on a low budget, just get it cheap. Get any kind of corporation. It protects your personal assets. And the same goes for nonprofit. Look at I put in there profit. Let me play on some words there. Nonprofit, profit corporations, or even if you have no profits in your corporation, you don't have to have a profit in your corporation to be a nonprofit. But anyway, for security of personal possessions. Well, this is a big benefit. And sometimes I wonder, are these conspiracy theories and strong accusations against 501c3s coming from atheists or mainstream people who hate to see Christians come into Torah and Christians believing in conspiracy theories and just to scare them so they won't get tax exempt, so they won't grow, so they won't thrive? Well, that's something I still question and speculate myself, but some of the logic out there and the false accusations makes me wonder. And, you know, kind of like believing in the earth being this or that. Sounds kind of strange to a lot of people. Well, where is that really coming from? Do these people really believe some of the stuff that they're teaching out there? Maybe they just like seeing how many people they can fool with intellectualism and playing with words and physics and semantics. Anyway. Don't want to go off on a tangent. Benefits here. Full-time and part-time workers may also receive the corporate benefits if it's a corporation, and compensations, you know, rewards, bonuses for doing good or bearing good fruit or profits or growth, just spiritual growth even, and or reasonable salaries for people who are sacrificing and serving their time and hard efforts of time and effort, and especially if they're doing it full-time and part-time to a degree. And that's to the discretion of each corporation. They can put that in their bylaws and reward their loyal members and workers. So that's another benefit. And who knows what other benefits. I'm not trying to claim all the benefits. If you want to share some with me, I can come up with a good list of benefits for being a corporation as well as a nonprofit corporation. Now, this is important. What are the risks? What are the dangers of non-501c3 status? Say you just want to be a 508 or a free church. What are some of the dangers of that? Well, potential IRS rejection of all tax exemption status for religious groups. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, you'll see in a little bit here. Potential IRS rejection of big charitable donors. So people who want to give a lot of money, like my brother who gave me in my ministry. If you're not a 501c3, there is a potential of rejection by the IRS for anyone who wants to write off, like I said, more than $5,000 or so per year. Again, small donors under that amount of money, whatever that current amount is, it's not going to affect them. So again, it's all right to be a little bitty and do what you can as how you feel inspired and whatever you feel obligated, but not to just rebuke people who want to grow and thrive and turn many more people to righteousness without compromise, like Daniel and Mordecai and Joseph, who had to serve, governments and be involved with some corrupt governments. How can we be involved without compromise? And where do we draw the line? There's going to be areas where we're not going to be perfect, but we don't want to make any big compromises. There's big questions and doubts. Do you want to eliminate those big questions and doubts? Otherwise, you must prove your eligibility for religious groups' tax-exempt status. So the Tax Code 508 is another option, like I said, to be addressed in a little while. But even that has some questions and doubts, which I'll show you and expose that, according to my understanding. Now, there's also potential audits and burdens of proof. You'll have this burden to prove that, okay, they're not a 501c3 that you gave that money to. Well, do they match up to the standards? And if they do match up to the standards, well, you can avoid being a 501c3, but there's a big burden of proving that you are compliant. This is placed on organizations and donors regarding donations given to any religious organizations that potentially meet official tax-exempt status IRS laws. No personal asset security. This is another danger. If you're not a corporation, if you're not part of an official corporation, well, then your personal assets can be taken away by anyone who sues you or by government fines if you're not playing by the rules. For non-corporate directors, if there's any directors or officers or members of any personal home groups, if you have homes or cars or bank accounts, all those things can be attacked by civilians or the government if you're not a corporation. And that's the big danger for financial security if you care about your personal belongings and your family who need financial security. It's because, like I said, the IRS can take, without even due process of law, your personal stuff legally, and you'd have to sue them to try to get it back. And that's very expensive, and then you have to win in any superior courts of this land. There's a risk of not winning. And I'll give you an example here, a historical example. You want some proof in the pudding, as we say? Hope you don't mind that idiom. But there's an example of a believer, I'm going to share this link with you, who lost a court case against the IRS, who wanted a tax deduction for a donation he made. He made $8,100 and something to a church that had their 501c3. It was revoked. And he claimed that since it was a church, it was exempt from following the rules and regulations of Section 501c3. And the IRS was saying, no, they weren't. They went to court about it. Here's a link on it. He lost the court case. He was denied. And I can copy that link for you if you send me an email, or, if anyone out there listening in live wants me to paste in the comment section to take a look at it, I can do that as well. Provide that upon request. But, the court noted in this court case, Section 508C1A does not free any church from having to meet 501c3 legal, lawful requirements. And for your information, 508C1A is just a subsection of the 508, and it relieves churches of the duty as placed upon other non-profit organizations to apply for recognition. So as a church, you don't have to apply for recognition. That's the 501c3 is simply recognition that you've been approved. And no questions or doubts about it as long as you maintain that status and don't get it lost or revoked or expired. Keep renewing it. So this duty comes from the Section 508. And we'll get to that in a little bit as well. So you can take a look at that court case on your own with that URL, and I can provide it for you upon request by contacting me via email. So what exactly is a U.S. Code 508? Here's a great link for it. I'll provide for you as well. The 508, the Code 508, does not offer more religious freedom. This is important to realize as you study and research it more thoroughly from the IRS tax code itself, as provided by that link. It doesn't offer more religious freedom compared to 501c3s, including doctrine, statement of beliefs, and religious practices. So a common misunderstanding and wrong information that people are putting out there is that, oh yeah, if you're a 508, you don't have to meet 501c3 standards or laws. Well, yes, you do. And as that court case shows, that there was a church that wasn't meeting 501c3 standards. 50108s must remain subject under the authority of 501c3s, but they don't have to apply for it, is what it's basically saying, to put it in a nutshell. You don't have to apply and obtain that status as a church. And as a reminder, the 508c1a is just a subsection of 508, and it relieves churches of the duty as placed upon other nonprofit corporations to apply for the recognition. You know, this is a duty that comes from the 508. Now, how about sole corporation? You might find that, or maybe you've already studied that to a degree, and there's also the idea of being a free church, and there's free churches out there. And I still have more to learn about this. There's so much information and diverse views, opinions, and information that's brought out there, so you have to really be careful what you believe, no matter how dogmatic people are. Sole corporation. First of all, beware of scams that become associated or claim to be. So there's a lot of fakers out there. There's a lot, just like there's fake news, there's scams trying to get recognition as if they are a corporation sole. The free church idea is not official legal terminology. This is a term that I've been seeing, and our treasurer Warren has been researching, and our conclusions are that, or with views that also this terminology does not offer absolute or automatic tax exemption status. And usually these people who are talking about free church out there are not well informed. They quickly say that you're of the devil if you're cooperating with the government or having a 501c3, part of the beast, and there's a lot of theories and views that are posed as facts. But the more I've studied and tried to learn from those preachers and teachers out there, the more I find out they're not really well informed as they think they are or claim to be. All churches claiming tax exempt must prove eligibility and be acting just as 501c3s during any IRS audits and or confirm tax exempt status. So in other words, if you're giving money to a church and they get audited, or you get audited saying, oh wait, who'd you give this money to? Burden of proof is on you to show that they are meeting the 501c3 laws. If they're not, if they're having any discriminations, or they're teaching in ways that the IRS thinks that it's not appropriate in their opinion, well, yeah, you can, it won't be a tax write-off. And if you don't want for people out there that don't want tax write-offs, they're not given that much money anyway, again, please don't get offended. I'm not attacking you or saying you're unrighteous or we're better than you or I'm better than you or anything like that. This is for people who are giving big enough bucks to help progress ministries, to bring more people to righteousness. If you want to have tax exempt status as a organization, and if you're a donor, a big donor, you want to give less money to the IRS and play by the rules, do it legally, this is what this video teaching is for. And how can we do this without compromise? As I've been proposing how we're doing it so far without any compromise, and even in our bylaws. Now, audits and burdens of proof are placed upon organizations and donors. To make this clear, regarding donations given to any religious organizations that potentially meet official tax-exempt status laws, to at least meet tax exemption and write-off standards. Again, it has to be compliant with 501c3s, even if they're not. No personal asset security for non-corporation directors, as I pointed out earlier, officers and members. So that means your personal homes, cars, bank accounts, any savings. All those things are still at risk if you're not a corporation. Again, I'm not so sure about the corporation sole. That seems to be a corporation, and that might protect personal assets. But just claiming to be a free church or to be a sole corporation or corporation sole, you still have to meet the 501c standards, and that's the big picture. according to my research and studies. In other words, let me break this down in a simplified way, if it's not simple enough, and correct me if you have any evidence to prove otherwise, but churches do not have to become 501c3s for tax exemption and write-offs for their big donors. I admit that. That's what I've come to conclude as well. But they must meet all requirements and remain compliant with all IRS laws and regulations as the same, I should put in there, for 501c3s. So for those out there who are saying you're part of the beast and that the 501c3s are putting you under the devil in some kind of way, then, well, don't claim any taxes as tax exempt. Well, yeah, if you're happy with that, that's fine. And we all have our rights to our beliefs, and I'm not trying to say that, but, those of you out there that take that view, I'm hoping this information can encourage you to stop pointing the finger at those of us who have 501c3s and who are not compromising with our religious beliefs and values and commandments in the Scriptures, that everything we're doing is based upon Scripture, not adding or taking away from it the best we can. And we shouldn't be pointing the finger and saying that we're slaves to the government. There's a lot of false accusations out there. Maybe some are bowing down and compromising, but so far I haven't. And I know that there's a lot of other organizations out there, 501c3, religious organizations that are not compromising in any of these big ways that are being accused of. Again, the burdens of proof are placed upon each church, religious organization. Not all religious organizations are churches, right? Including mine that I'm a part of, and charitable donor. They all may be challenged by the IRS in audits, judgments, and penalties. The burden of proof is placed upon anyone who doesn't have an official legal status as a nonprofit or a church that's in compliance with the rules and regulations. Anyone who wants tax exemption, any organizations, and or write-offs for their faithful expenses or donations must be the same, according to the laws, as if they were a 501c3 in every way, whether we like it or not. If we're not, then it can be challenged and taken away in court if we claim it as a tax write-off or try to avoid paying taxes in any way accordingly. Therefore, why not actually become one to maximize growth, or support one that maximizes spiritual growth, especially financial security for the leadership, and give more for Yah? This is His money again, holy money, if we want to put it that way, set apart money that's been set apart, and given back to Him, to His ministry. And for your information, Torah Truth Seekers Incorporated is not categorized as a church. We don't have a building. As one of those links that I show you, it defines what a church is and what a religious organization is, and I can't seem to pull up those in my browser right now, because this video presentation is taking up my bandwidth. But we can see that that we're simply classified as a religious organization, as a non-profit religious public educational, leadership building, worshiping, and fellowshipping corporation. That's pretty much in a nutshell what we're doing as Torah Truth Seekers Incorporated. Also doing business as Graftin, just one word, Graftin, Graftin. Also Graftin Online Ministry, because it's a lot of online ministry. Live video teachings and recordings, articles, and hosting biblical feasts and weekly Sabbaths and other worships and gatherings, but no physical church or building. Any kind of mosque or synagogue or shul or church is considered, under the 508 category and does not have to apply for a 501c3 unless they want to, and for the benefits of the 501c3, as I already pointed out. So let me conclude with being in this world but not of it. This is our goal, whether we're a corporation or not, nonprofit, 501c3. As our Messiah prayed for us to his Father and our Father, the Father of all, he says, I have given them your word. This is John chapter 17, verse 14. And the world has hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Verse 15, I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, or the system of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. Verse 16, they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them by your truth. And this is the big issue. Are we compromising with truth to keep our 501c3s? Well, if we lose our 501c3, that's the worst that the government can do for us. But he says, your word is truth. We're not going to compromise it. Whether we're a 501c3 or not, we want to do his will and not sacrifice truth for monetary values or materialism or material values. Verse 18, as you sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, set apart, that they also may be sanctified by your truth. So the truth will sanctify us. It will set us apart. It will set us free, as another scripture says. The truth shall make you free. We also got to remember Joseph, Daniel, Mordecai. They were still involved. They were in this world. They were in the government system even, but they were not compromising in any big, obvious ways. And this is what we need to hold fast to try to be righteous as they were and faithful. And if any laws come against us, okay, don't compromise and let the chips fall as they may. So being all things here, also my last slide in conclusion, being all things without compromise is what I want to add as a very important thing. All things to what? To who? Well, I think the Apostle Shaul, Paul, set good examples in this regard, where he said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, beginning in verse 19, he says, for though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. So he was focusing on more growth, turning more people to righteousness, knowing when too much was too much to bombard people with, and holding off and waiting for the right information to help people progress like baby steps into conversion. And this is a context, this is a very misunderstood section of Scripture by mainstream Christianity, because you can really take this into liberal, very compromising conclusions. And I'm going to explain it in a way that's compliant with the whole Bible and all the commandments here. Verse 20, and to the Jews they became as a Jew. Well, of course, he was a Hebrew. He was a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin, as he points out elsewhere. He was in the Sanhedrin, that I might win the Jews. To those who are under the law. So under the law is an idiom of being under the penalties of the law. As under the law, he supported them to a degree. He wouldn't compromise, is what I propose. He's not saying that we should compromise, but he just wouldn't outright come out against things until he felt like the time was right, and sometimes he got in trouble anyways, right, for not compromising, and stoned and whipped and eventually got beheaded in the end. Nevertheless, he said that I might win those who are under the law. And this could be even talking about the oral law. You know, anyone of us would do this when we go to a congregation. We're going to just cooperate, and we're not going to just get nitpicky with all their traditions. Hey, that's not in the Bible. This is not in the Bible. Oh, what are you doing about that? Where does Moses say? Where does the Scripture say to do that? He wouldn't just come out, so he would just kind of go in, and he would be a part of the system. And then, as opportunities came to witness, and as he felt inspired to express some truth and progress people in that, he would do it, but without compromise is what I propose. Verse 21. To those who are without law, as without law. But notice how he says, not being without Torah toward God. In other words, he's not saying that this is permission to sin, to compromise with sin, but under law toward the Messiah. And now Christians tend to think that Messiah, Christ, is different from God, or that, in this regard, that his commandments are different, or he changed the commandments. There's no evidence of that, really, and we don't see that in the New Testament. We see a shifting of priesthood going back to the original priesthood of Melchizedek. Tithing in the Hebrews chapter 7 is addressed, and the changing of the priesthood, and circumcision not being a requirement for salvation. There's no evidence in the 5 books of Moses that you earn your salvation by circumcision. So Paul wasn't trying to change these things. He was trying to magnify the Torah and pointed out how Abraham, was he given salvation? Was he given the covenant? Was he declared righteous when he was circumcised or uncircumcised? Well, he was uncircumcised for years, and he was considered righteous and given the covenants. It wasn't until he was 99 that he actually got his circumcision. But he was saved, so to speak, as we call saved, given salvation, given the covenants as well, long before he was physically circumcised. In the scriptures in Deuteronomy, it says, circumcise your hearts. And so through the books of Moses and even onward, we see the priority of spiritual circumcision is a higher priority to our Creator, our Maker, the Most High. And Paul did this. He was like this that he might win those who are without law. And so he wouldn't just nitpicky all their sins right away and bombard the whole Torah on them. He would remain faithful himself and just express things as he went along, just like we all do in our workplaces. We don't just go around saying, hey, everybody, you got to get on your soapbox. And well, some people do, I guess, but some of us are a little more cautious and careful with what we share in the workplace and in the public, and try to discern whether it's the right time to say this or say that or witness this and that. And this is what I believe he's trying to address here. To the weak I became as weak. Okay, someone says, oh yeah, I've got problems with this sin. I've got addictions to that. It's okay to say, oh yeah, I had those weaknesses one time too, and not to lie about it, but to say, hey, I struggle too. I've got imperfections. I've got weaknesses too. We all do. We're all human. But just take baby steps. Keep walking. So, Paul would be weak to those who are weak, and he would relate to them too, that he might win the weak ones. We all do this with people we come across who confess their shortcomings and their fallings. We want to relate to them and to be shown that, hey, we are weak too. We're not, you might look too highly on us for being so religious or obedient. And really, sometimes we've got to confess that, we're still slipping up and we're trying. Not purposely, not willfully, but we're making progressive improvements. As Paul says, I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Okay, yeah, you can please some of the people some of the time and help others, but you can't please all the people all the time. He realized that, and he wasn't just a pleaser of men. But when he says all things to all men, he's talking about without compromising in the commandments that were given to his Messiah and were given by Yah from the beginning, of the So here's Torah the big itself. Picture and conclusion to the matter of even this video teaching, whether it be nonprofit corporation status, official, or the burden of proving it. Really, the big picture is we all want to have religious freedom and to express ourselves to the world in ways that brings many to righteousness, his righteousness, without compromise. And if people are accusing us of compromising, okay, the burden of proof is on you. Show me where I am compromising. According to the written Torah and the whole Holy Bible.